Maybe these were cool in the 80s or 90s. I don't know. Pretty silly looking. Yeah, the 1990s called and they want their bling back. I'm gonna ship this box to the Smithsonian. Alright, we'll do it like a medical team. I'll be the surgical tech, you be the doctor. You say whatever. You say 14 millimeter and I hand it to you.
That's literally the opposite, but that's gonna have to be.
Okay, so what do you want first?
I have no idea what the hell you're talking about.
What wrench do you want first?
I don't fucking remember.
Drop that caliper first. What wrench do you want?
Yeah, I don't fucking know what wrench I want. I had to try about 50 different wrenches before I figured that out.
12. You want a 12. Catch that wheel. So hold up on the wheel, pull the axle out, drop your wheel down. Boom. Looky there. Toss that off. Just let it hang. Golden, see? That's why we greased that axle last time, because now it comes off easy.
Yeah, this wheel just don't come out easy.
Yeah, roll it out forward. Where are you going with it? There you go.
That's not the right one.
It's not a 14?
It's a 13 apparently. It's too...
That fork should slide out. They're pretty tight, even though the bolts are loose. So, take your screwdriver right here, stick them between your flange right there. Pulls right out. Look at that. This fork is loose. When you put the brakes on and rock the bike back and forth, it would click, almost like if the gooseneck, whatever you call that thing up there, headset, whatever you call it thing where the handlebars attached to is loose. So that was tight. We checked the front brake drum. That was tight. Axle was tight. It still had play in it, and it's this fork. I don't know if you can see the play on the camera, but quite a bit of play in there. And there's no bushings or sleeves on this that are replaced. The on these cheap ass forks, the oil seal actually holds that from moving. So we'll pop the dust cover off. I ordered some new seals for it. I don't think it comes with new dust covers, so we'll keep these. Or we can just run them without dust covers. It looks kind of cool. If you keep your bike in a garage and you don't really get it rained on too much, you don't have to run these dust covers. It looks kind of cool without the dust covers. I used to run all my motocross bikes with no dust covers because see inside there how corroded it is and all the rust? That's what happens under a dust cover. If you keep the dust covers off, you can clean that with Q-tips every time you come back from a big muddy ride, and you keep your seals in great shape. So I may go no dust covers just for cool looks. Look like a racer. But here you can see that play in the fork around that seal. It's just wobbling around in there. These are Gen 4 forks, and they have a snap ring in them instead of that wire. So pretty corroded. Get a really corroded snap ring, your snap ring pliers usually won't work. You'll break the tips off of them, and it's easier just to use a drift and just get one edge popped up. And when you get that edge popped up, looks like it needs something thicker. That one's bending. Next level thicker one. They're pretty big holes in there, so you can get it in there and get it popped out. That thing's really rusted in there, so I broke my Epic Harbor Freight drift. So what I'll do is I can use it just to get, if I get it just pulled out enough, I can slide a screwdriver under it and then pry it up, which is what I'm going to do, because this thing's pretty rusted in there. And that's why I don't like dust covers. There we go. So I got it started. Now I'll get a stronger screwdriver that won't break, and I'll work it around and pop this thing out of here. If you get it popped loose, it'll kind of work itself out. That's what you got in there. And you got your oil seal right there. We'll pop off the top cap, and the bottom's got to come off too. Pop the top off and drain the oil. This is a Gen 4 Maddog, and remember the Gen 1 was a 12 millimeter. This one takes a 10 on top, and If you don't have an impact gun, you got to loosen that while it's still in the triple clamps. Otherwise, you'll never get it loose. There we go, there's the top cap. So as always, we'll lay our parts in the order we find them. The oil's already coming out. Get rid of this. So I've got a spacer in there next. It's a decent sized spring. It's not progressive. It's a constant rate. Pour the oil out, see what we get there. But do a few times. It does have compression and damping, sounds like, just like the Gen 1. Might be a pretty decent fork once we rebuild it. Should be a keeper. A 6mm on the bottom, and we'll knock this out. Should have a crush washer. More oil will come out. I don't see the crush washer, so it's stuck up inside there. But that's what's holding it all together. Put that on the bottom of the run. We'll pull up on this. Look at there, it comes right out. There's your fork lower. We got the springs underneath the damper, so they act as bottom springs. And we'll push this all the way up through here and bring it out the top. This is up. Let me get this oriented. Look at all these little springs. 1, 2, 3. 3 bottom springs in a row. Now this can be pushed up and come out the top. Oh geez, got another little spring in there. There's your bottom spring right there. So we got this, then this, then these 3, then the bottom. Still looking for a crush washer. The crush washer's in there. It seems to be pretty firm, so I'm going to leave it in there. Usually if you think you're going to leave them in there, they fall out on you on the floor and you don't have one. I think I'll leave that in there rather than bending it all up. We had about 75 cc's of oil there. So just like the Gen 1 forks, I'm going to go with 80 to 100 cc's. I figure a little bit leaked out with those poor seals, and I dropped a bunch on the rag, and there's still some all over the springs and stuff. On this fork, the crush washer stayed on there, so you see what that looks like. Alright, the right and left forks all laid out, ready to reassemble. But first we got to get these seals out. It may seem crazy to spray penetrating fluid around the seal with all this oil in here, but the oil won't get to the outside of this, so it'll loosen up a little bit. You're going to want to get some leverage on this thing. Get a pretty big screwdriver here. Stick it underneath there. There'll be a little spot, and you can pry like hell and it'll pop out. There's your seal. Don't be too excited to throw away your old seals yet. We're going to use those, maybe. I'm going to paint these things because they're frickin' ugly. And I'm going to put the seals in before I paint them so I don't mess up the paint trying to put the seals in. I got the eBay seals in. They're an exact match. I like to use some Armor All or grease on the edges of the seal to make it nice and slippery. So slide in there better. It's going to be super tight. So you can take a socket that's about the same size as this and hammer on it. But if you don't want to mess up this or take a chance of damaging that, you can use the old seal. This part of the seal is steel. That rubber is covering steel. So that's a nice strong surface on the very outside. You can use the old seal to drive the new seal in. On the seal, there's a little crack there. It's usually the wider one. The bigger one, where you can see the spring easy that goes on the inside where the oil is. I'm going to sit on the concrete floor so I have a more solid surface to hammer. It doesn't bounce around. To see that groove in there, so you might have to put it a little bit further than that so you can get that clip in there. Put it down in there a bit, so I'm going to take the old seal out. And I'll flip the socket over. I made my socket flat, so it'll just hit the outside part there. And I'll drive it the rest of the way down. So because these are Chinese-made forks, you can put the clip in before everything else. You can still fit everything in there, even though the clip's in the way. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'll do everything that I'm going to mess the paint up on the new forks with, do the new paint job with. Something I failed to mention, when you're taking these bolts out on the bottom, sometimes your entire assembly will just spin around. The bolt will never loosen up and it won't come out. What's happening is this is spinning around inside your fork, and there's no way to hold this. But if you have an impact gun, you can see they put little dents in there. You can throw big screwdrivers in there, whatever you need. I personally like to use a long drift, and if you shove the drift down inside the fork, it'll engage that hole. You can push against it and it'll hold it just enough that an impact gun will take this bolt out. And the same thing when you're putting it together, you're running this bolt in. When you're putting it together, this will absolutely just spin around inside the fork. So you're going to have to hold this with something so you can tighten this bolt against that crush washer. And to me, these drifts work good. But it doesn't take much if you have an impact gun. You can stick the end of a broom handle in there or something, you know, just a piece of wood. It doesn't really matter. The paint's dry enough, and I've already got the seals in the little spring in there, so shouldn't have to manhandle it too much. Assembly's the very opposite of taking it apart. I'll try not to harp on anything. I'll just show some highlights. Grease on any O-ring. I'll put a little grease on these O-rings so they don't get cut when you're putting them back together. About 80 cc's in. Never start anything with the impact gun, always start it by hand. Particularly careful not to strip this out. Alright, reassemble your scooter, go ride.